Dominic sat across from me at the kitchen table, picking his teeth with a calmness that made my blood run cold. He thought he was looking at his broken, terrified wife, a woman he'd spent 20 years hollowing out until she was just a shell. He didn't know the woman holding the coffee mug wasn't the wife he planned to abandon with $120,000 in fraudulent debt. He didn't know he was already in a cage. He just hadn't heard the lock click yet. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. You're doing it again, Olivia. You're making a spectacle. Dominic's voice wasn't loud. It was that low, scraping whisper he used when he wanted to make me feel small, the kind of tone that sounded reasonable to anyone sitting 2 tables away, but felt like a serrated knife to me. He tapped his index finger against the stack of papers on the bistro table. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was maddening, cutting through the ambient noise of the espresso machine and the indie folk music playing on the cafe speakers. I looked down at the documents. The font was tiny, dense blocks of legalese that seemed to swim before my eyes. My hands were shaking so bad I had to put my hands in my lap to hide them. I just asked what the interest rate is, Dom? I stammered, my voice cracking, and why it says lender at the top if it's just insurance. Dominic sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation that signaled his immense burden in dealing with an idiot like me. He picked up his ceramic cup, looked at the dregs of his Americano, and set it back down with a clatter that made me flinch. God, you are exhausting, he said, leaning in. His cologne, something expensive and woody that used to smell like safety and now smelled like dread, wafted over the table. I told you, it's a liability wrapper for the new venture. It's structured as a loan for tax purposes. Why do you always have to interrogate me? Do you think I'm stupid? Is that it? You think I don't know how to handle business? No, I don't think you're stupid, I whispered, feeling the familiar burn of tears in the corners of my eyes. We're already so tight, Dom. The credit cards are maxed. If this is another debt. It is leverage, Olivia, Jesus. He slammed his hand on the table. The cafe went silent. A woman in an oversized beige sweater at the next table looked over her laptop screen, her eyebrows raised. A barista stopped wiping the counter. The silence hung heavy and thick, suffocating me. I felt the heat rushing up my neck, that blotchy red flush that happens when I'm embarrassed. Lower your voice, I pleaded, staring at the grain of the wooden table. Please, everyone is looking. Let them look, Dominic hissed, though he lowered his volume back to that venomous whisper. Let them see what I have to put up with. A wife who doesn't trust her husband. A wife who would rather sabotage our future than sign a few standard forms. You know, I'm doing this for you, for Zoe, so we can get out of that roach motel of an apartment and actually live like human beings. But you're just an anchor, Olivia, dragging us down. He shoved a pen toward me. It was a heavy silver Mont Blanc he'd bought for himself last Christmas when we couldn't even afford to fix the radiator. It rolled across the uneven table and hit my hand. Sign the papers, he commanded, right now. Stop acting like a child. I picked up the pen. It felt cold and heavy. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Don't sign it, a voice inside me screamed. It was a small, quiet voice, buried under layers of fear and 20 years of conditioning, but it was there. He's lying. He's always lying. I looked at the signature line. Borrower, Olivia R. Mitchell. I can't, I said. The words came out before I even authorized them. Dominic's face changed. The mask of irritation slipped, replaced by a cold, predatory stillness. His eyes narrowed. He reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard, his thumb digging into the soft flesh of my forearm, pressing against the bone. What did you say to me? I said I can't, I gasped, trying to pull my arm back. I'm not signing until I read them properly, at home, without you staring at me. You are going to sign them now, or so help me God, Olivia. Don't make me cause a scene here. You know how I get when I'm disrespected. He squeezed harder. The pain was sharp, immediate. "You're hurting me," I squeaked out. "I'm helping you," he sneered. "I'm helping you be a supportive wife for once in your miserable life." That was it. Something snapped. It wasn't bravery. It was pure animalistic flight response. I yanked my arm back with every ounce of strength I had. His grip slipped, and his hand knocked into his coffee cup. The cup tipped, sending cold black coffee splashing across the papers and onto his pristine white dress shirt. "You stupid bitch!" he roared, jumping up. The chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor. The entire shop gasped in unison. I didn't wait. I grabbed my purse, the cheap imitation leather one, because he said the real ones were a waste of money for someone who didn't go anywhere, and I ran. I burst out of the heavy glass door, my shoulder slamming into the brass handle. The little bell above the door jingled cheerfully, a mocking contrast to the chaos erupting behind me. The Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow. It was late October, that time of year when the city stops pretending it's autumn and just aggressively reminds you that winter is coming. The Hawk, as the locals called it, whipped down Michigan Avenue, cutting right through my thin cardigan. It stung my wet eyes and instantly froze the tear tracks on my cheeks. I didn't stop. I turned right and just walked, fast, my heels clicking unevenly on the pavement. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. He's going to kill me. He's going to absolutely kill me. I risked a glance over my shoulder. Through the glass window of the coffee shop, I saw Dominic standing there, dabbing at his shirt with a handful of napkins, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He was shouting something at the barista, probably blaming them for the spill. He hadn't followed me yet. I kept moving, weaving through the rush hour crowd. The sidewalk was a sea of people. Businessmen in trench coats checking their watches, tourists with shopping bags from the Magnificent Mile, students with headphones on. I bumped into a guy in a blue suit. "Watch it," he grumbled, not even looking at me. "Sorry," I whispered, clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. My legs felt like jelly. I needed to get away, but where? Home? No. Home was the first place he'd go. Home was his territory. If I went home, I'd be trapped in that apartment with him when he walked in the door, still smelling like stale coffee and fury. I couldn't handle that. Not tonight. I walked 2 blocks, then 3. My heart rate wasn't coming down. I felt dizzy, the towering skyscrapers seemingly leaning in over me, blocking out the gray sky. I stopped at the corner of Wacker Drive, leaning against a cold stone planter to catch my breath. I was 42 years old, 42, and I was hiding on a street corner like a runaway teenager because I was afraid of my husband. I looked down at my hands. They were red from the cold and trembling violently. The red marks from his fingers were already starting to bruise on my wrist. What am I doing? I thought, a sob catching in my throat. What is my life? I fumbled in my purse for a tissue, my fingers brushing against the cracked screen of my old iPhone. I should call someone, but who? I had isolated myself from my friends years ago. Dominic didn't like them, said they were bad influences or jealous of our love. My parents were gone. Zoe was away at college, living her own life, and I couldn't drag her into this mess. I couldn't let her know her father was a monster. I wiped my nose, the tissue dissolving instantly against the snot and tears. I looked ridiculous, a middle-aged woman crying on a street corner in downtown Chicago. The pedestrian signal chirped, a rhythmic mechanical bird sound indicating it was safe to walk. Chirp, 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 chirp. The crowd surged forward around me, a river of dark coats and determined faces. I took a step to follow them, just to keep moving, just to not be a stationary target. But then I stopped. I froze. My feet felt like they had been poured into the concrete sidewalk. Directly across the street, waiting for the light on the other side of the intersection, was a woman. She was standing perfectly still amidst the flow of people, like a rock in a stream. She was wearing a navy blue wool coat, tailored perfectly to her waist, with a high collar turned up against the wind. She had leather gloves on and a structured leather tote bag hanging effortlessly from her elbow. She looked successful. She looked put together. She looked powerful. But that wasn't why I stopped. I stopped because she was looking right at me, and she had my face. I blinked, hard, sure that the stress and the lack of sleep were finally inducing hallucinations. Maybe I was having a stroke. I rubbed my eyes with the back of my hand and looked again. She was still there. The resemblance wasn't just passing. It was terrifying. It was absolute. She had the same deep mahogany skin tone, the same high forehead, the same slightly almond shape to her eyes. Even her hair, though hers was pulled back into a sleek professional chignon while mine was a frizzy mess escaping from a cheap plastic claw clip, the texture was identical. It was like looking into a mirror that showed you not who you were, but who you could have been. A cab honked loudly, a jarring blast of sound that made me jump, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. The woman across the street wasn't moving either. People were brushing past her, flowing around her, but she stood locked on me. Then I saw it, the detail that made my stomach drop through the floor. She had a small mole just above her upper lip, on the right side. I raised my trembling hand to my own face, my fingers brushing the exact same spot above my lip. I had that mole. I had hated it in high school, tried to cover it with concealer until my mom told me it was a beauty mark. The woman saw me touch my face. Her eyes widened slightly. The distance between us was maybe 50 feet, 4 lanes of asphalt and rush hour traffic, but the connection was instant and electric. It felt like a physical tether had snapped into place between our chests. The don't walk hand started flashing orange. The countdown timer began. 10, 9, 8. My brain scrambled for a logical explanation. A coincidence? A doppelganger? A long-lost cousin? The woman took a step off the curb. She wasn't waiting for the next light. She was coming toward me. Panic flared in my chest again. The flight instinct that had propelled me out of the coffee shop kicked back into gear. This was too weird. This was too much. My husband had just assaulted me, and now a hallucination was walking through traffic to get me. I turned to run. I actually pivoted on my heel, ready to bolt down Wacker Drive. Wait! The voice carried over the noise of a delivery truck idling nearby. It wasn't a shout, but a projected command. It stopped me. I turned back. She was navigating through the stopped cars, moving with a confident grace that I envied even in my terror. She stepped up onto the curb, just a few feet away from me. Up close, the resemblance was even more jarring. It was dizzying. I was looking at my own eyes, but they were clearer, sharper. They didn't have the dark circles of exhaustion that mine did. They held a spark of fire, not fear. She stopped about 3 feet away, respecting my space, but close enough that I could smell her perfume. It was something rich and spicy, sandalwood and maybe jasmine. It smelled expensive. It smelled like money and confidence. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. Her voice was lower than mine, huskier, but the cadence, the rhythm of her speech. It was exactly like hearing myself on a recording. I backed up until my spine hit the cold stone of the planter. "Who are you?" I whispered. My voice sounded thin and pathetic compared to hers. "Why are you staring at me?" She looked at me, her gaze sweeping over my face, noting the tear tracks, the red blotches, the terror. Then she looked down at my wrist, where the red marks from Dominic's grip were darkening. Her eyes narrowed, a flash of cold anger passing through them that wasn't directed at me. "I'm Octavia," she said. She took off one of her leather gloves, revealing a hand that was the twin of mine. Same long fingers, same nail shape, though hers were manicured with a clear polish and mine were bitten down to the quick. And I know this is going to sound like I'm crazy or like a scam, but please, just listen for a second. Don't run. "I don't know you," I said, clutching my purse tighter. "I need to go." "You don't need to go," she said firmly. Look at me. Really look at me." She stepped closer, pointing to her face. "The mole, the hairline, the eyes. You see it, don't you?" I nodded slowly, unable to deny it. "I see it." "I'm not a stranger," she said, her voice softening, losing its command and gaining a surprising warmth. "I'm your sister. We're twins." I let out a breathless, hysterical little laugh. "That's impossible. I'm an only child. My parents, the Mitchells, they adopted you," she finished for me. "From Memphis, right? March 24th, 1983, St. Jude's Hospital." The world tilted on its axis. The noise of the city seemed to rush away, leaving us in a vacuum of silence. March 24th was my birthday. I was born in Memphis. My parents had told me that much, but they always swore I was their biological child, their miracle baby. "How do you know that?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because I was there," Octavia said. "I was in the crib next to you, and I've been looking for you for 5 years. She looked around us. The wind was picking up, blowing grit and dead leaves around our ankles. "You're freezing," she observed, "and you look like you're in trouble." "Serious trouble." She glanced meaningfully at my wrist again. I just had a fight with my husband." "That wasn't a fight," Octavia said, her eyes hard. "That was an attack. I saw you run out of that coffee shop. I was watching from across the street." She extended her hand, palm up. An invitation. "My apartment is 10 minutes from here, in Bronzeville. It's warm, I have tea, and I have proof. Please, just give me an hour. If you don't believe me then, you can leave, and I'll never bother you again." I looked at her hand. Then I looked down the street toward the direction of my apartment, where Dominic was probably waiting, pacing the floor, crafting the lecture he would give me about my incompetence. I looked back at the woman who wore my face like a suit of armor. "Bronzeville?" I asked. "Just a short walk," she smiled, and for the first time I saw a dimple in her left cheek. I had the same dimple. "Come on." We walked side by side, heading south. It was the strangest sensation of my life. I kept glancing at her reflection in the shop windows as we passed. 2 identical silhouettes, one slouched and huddled against the wind, the other upright and striding with purpose. "I don't understand," I said after we crossed the bridge over the Chicago River. The steel grating hummed under our feet. "If we're twins, why did they separate us?" "That's the million-dollar question," Octavia said, staring straight ahead. "Our bio mom was young, 19, broke. She couldn't handle 2. The agency split us up to place us faster. It was a closed adoption, sealed records. They weren't supposed to tell anyone we existed." "So how did you find me?" "I'm a private investigator," she said casually, as if she were saying she was a librarian or a barista. I stopped walking for a second. "A PI? Like spy stuff?" She chuckled. "Less James Bond, more sitting in cars, peeing in bottles, and scrolling through databases. But yes, I have resources. I tracked down the agency records when the laws changed in Tennessee a few years back. Found the Mitchell family. Found you." She started walking again, and I scrambled to catch up. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" "I tried," she said, her voice dropping. "I sent a letter 2 years ago to your home address." I frowned. "I never got a letter." "I figured," Octavia said grimly. "It was return receipt requested. It was signed for by a D. King. Dominic." My blood ran cold. Dominic had signed for a letter from my long-lost sister and threw it away? Or hid it? "He never told me," I murmured. "He checks the mail. He says I lose things, so he handles all the correspondence." "Of course he does," Octavia muttered, almost to herself. "Classic isolation tactic." "What?" "Nothing. We're almost there." We turned off the main thoroughfare onto a quieter street, lined with beautiful, historic graystones. The wind was less brutal here, blocked by the sturdy, century-old buildings. My mind was racing. Dominic had stolen a sister from me. For 2 years, I could have known her. I could have had someone. The resentment flared up, hot and sharp, mixing with the fear. I feel like I'm dreaming, I said, watching my sneakers scuff against the pavement next to her polished leather boots. This morning, I was just Olivia, just a wife. A bad wife, according to him. You're not a bad wife, Octavia said fiercely. And you're not just Olivia. You're a survivor. I can see that. You don't know me. I know us, she said. We have the same DNA, Olivia, the same hardware. You might have different software installed right now because of how you were raised or who you're living with, but the steel underneath, that's the same. You're stronger than you think. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But I felt like wet cardboard, soggy, tearing apart, useless. Here we are, she said, stopping in front of a gorgeous limestone building with a wrought iron fence. Octavia keyed us into the main door. The lobby smelled of lemon polish and old wood. 3rd floor, she said. No elevator, good for the glutes. We climbed the stairs. The stairwell was wide and wooden, the banister smooth under my hand. With every step, I felt like I was ascending further away from my life, from the chaos of the coffee shop, from Dominic. At the 3rd floor landing, she unlocked a heavy oak door and pushed it open. Welcome to the headquarters, she said, stepping aside to let me in. I walked inside and stopped. The apartment was incredible. It wasn't huge, but it felt vast because of the high ceilings and the way it was organized. One wall was entirely covered in bookshelves, packed with colorful spines. A vintage record player sat in the corner, and soft jazz, something with a saxophone, was playing low in the background. There were plants everywhere, monsteras, fiddle leaf figs, hanging vines, making the air feel fresh and oxygenated. It smelled of old books, expensive coffee, and that sandalwood perfume. It was warm, not just temperature-wise, but spiritually warm. It felt like a home. My apartment with Dominic was always cold, always pristine, stripped of any personality because he hated clutter. This place was cluttered in the best way possible, filled with life. Shoes off, if you don't mind, Octavia said, kicking off her boots and lining them up on a rack. I toed off my sneakers. My socks had a hole in the big toe. I curled my toes under to hide it. Let me take your coat, she said. I peeled off my beige cardigan, the one Dominic said made me look respectable, but actually just made me look invisible. Octavia took it and hung it up next to her navy wool coat. Seeing the 2 coats hanging side by side was jarring. One was structured, high quality, imposing. The other was limp, cheap, and shapeless. Come on, she said, guiding me toward a plush velvet sofa that looked like it could swallow me whole. Sit. I'm going to put the kettle on. You look like you need something strong, but we'll start with Earl Grey. I sank into the sofa. It was soft, enveloping. I looked around the room. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were framed photos. I squinted at them. There was Octavia graduating from... Was that the police academy? There was Octavia on a boat. Octavia shaking hands with a tall man in a suit. I stood up, drawn to a small silver frame tucked in the back. I picked it up. It was a black and white photo of 2 babies in a hospital crib, sleeping head to head. That's us, Octavia called from the kitchen, the sound of water running, filling the silence. First and last picture taken together. I traced the glass with my finger. 2 identical babies, 2 separate lives. I sat back down, clutching the frame to my chest. For the first time since I ran out of that coffee shop, my shoulders dropped. I was safe here. I didn't know for how long, and I didn't know what would happen when I had to leave. But for this moment, in this room that smelled like sandalwood and safety, I wasn't alone. Okay, Octavia said, walking back in with a tray holding 2 steaming mugs and a plate of cookies. She set it down on the coffee table and sat in the armchair opposite me, leaning forward, her elbows on her knees. She looked at me with those intense, mirror image eyes. Drink your tea, she said gently, and then we're going to talk about that husband of yours. because I have a feeling he's the reason you look like you've been holding your breath for 20 years. I took a sip. The tea was hot, sweet, and comforting. You have no idea, I whispered. Try me, she said. I'm a detective. I'm good at puzzles. I held the ceramic mug with both hands, letting the heat seep into my frozen palms. The steam rose in a lazy spiral, carrying the scent of bergamot and something citrusy. It was Earl Grey, but better than the box stuff I bought at Kroger. Everything here was better. The lighting was softer, the air was cleaner, the silence wasn't heavy with the threat of an impending argument. It was just silence. Octavia watched me over the rim of her own mug. She hadn't taken her eyes off me since we sat down. It wasn't predatory, though. It was like she was trying to memorize a map. It's weird, right? She asked, her voice cutting through the quiet. Looking at me. It's like looking at a deep fake. It's terrifying, I admitted, my voice still raspy from the crying. I keep waiting for you to disappear. Or for me to wake up in my bed with Dominic shaking me because I forgot to set the coffee timer. You're not dreaming, Octavia said, setting her mug down on a cork coaster. And you're definitely not crazy. I know he tells you that you are. I can see it in the way you second-guess your sentences before you even finish them. I flinched. Was I that obvious? He says I have a selective memory, that I invent problems. Gaslighting 101, Octavia said dryly. Textbook. But we'll get to him. First, we need to settle the US thing, because until you really believe it, until you feel it in your gut, you're going to feel like an intruder here. And you're not an intruder, Olivia. You're family. She leaned back, crossing her legs. She was wearing thick wool socks, gray with a red stripe. I looked down at my feet. I was wearing almost identical socks, just a cheaper synthetic blend. The coincidence made a shiver run down my spine. You said you're a PI, I said, trying to ground myself in facts. So, this is a case to you? It started as a case, she corrected. 5 years ago, when my adoptive mom, Pearl, passed away, she left me a box. She said she couldn't die with the secret. She told me I had a twin, that we were separated at birth because the agency in Tennessee had a policy against placing twins together if they were hard to place. Too much burden on one family, they said. She snorted, a bitter sound. Economics of human trafficking, basically. Supply and demand. So you looked for me? I hunted you, she said intensely. I spent 3 years fighting the Tennessee Department of Children's Services to unseal the records. I had to sue them. I spent more money on lawyers than I did on my student loans. And then finally, I got the file. She stood up abruptly. Stay there. I need to show you. Words are cheap. Dominic has probably taught you that much. You need to see the paper. She walked to the bookshelf, to the third shelf up, and pulled out a sturdy red leather archival box. It looked old, the corners worn white. She carried it over like it was the Holy Grail and placed it on the coffee table between us. Octavia sat back down and placed her hand on the lid of the box. She took a deep breath. Ready? I nodded, though my stomach was doing flip-flops. Yes. She lifted the lid. Inside, the box was packed with manila envelopes and loose photographs. There was a smell that wafted out, old paper, dust, and the faint, sweet scent of decay that comes with documents from the 80s. She reached in and pulled out a yellow document with a perforated edge. It looked like a hospital form, typed on a typewriter, the letters slightly uneven. This is the intake form from St. Jude's Hospital, Memphis, March 24, 1983, 4:12 a.m. and 4:26 a.m. She slid the paper across the mahogany table. I didn't want to touch it as if it might burn me, but I forced myself to pick it up. The paper was brittle. Patient name, Latrice Williams. Infant A, female. Sixlabes foras. Infant B, female. Sixlabes tuas. I'm infant A, Octavia said, pointing to the line. I was 4 minutes faster, always in a rush. She pointed to the second line. That's you, infant B. I I stared at the B, just a letter, a clerical designation that determined my entire life. If I had been A, would I be the confident detective sitting in a warm apartment in Bronzeville? If she had been B, would she be the one trembling in a coffee shop fearing her husband? And this, she said, pulling out a glossy photograph, is the smoking gun. It was a Polaroid. 2 babies swaddled in those generic hospital blankets with the blue and pink stripes. We were identical lumps of flesh, red-faced and squalling. But on the wrist of the baby on the left, there was a plastic bracelet. I squinted. Baby Girl Williams, A. On the right, Baby Girl Williams, B. Who took this? I asked. A nurse, Octavia said. She felt bad. She knew we were going to different foster homes pending adoption. She slipped this into my file. It shouldn't be there. She reached into the box again and pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. And here is the transfer of custody. The Mitchells picked you up on April 2nd. The Dubois family, my parents, picked me up on April 10th. She laid the documents out in a row like a winning poker hand. The timestamps, the signatures, the matching case numbers. It was irrefutable. It was a mathematical proof of my existence. The Mitchells, I whispered, looking at my father's signature. It was strong and loopy, just like I remembered it from my report cards. They looked me in the eye my whole life. When I asked if I was adopted, because kids at school teased me about not looking like them, they swore on the Bible I wasn't. They were scared, Octavia said, her voice softening but remaining analytical. Closed adoptions in the 80s were strict. They were probably terrified that if you knew, you'd go looking, or the bio mom would come back and they'd lose you. Fear makes people do terrible things, Olivia. It makes them lie to the people they love. It makes them liars, I corrected bitterly. My whole life is a lie. My parents lied. My husband lies. Am I the only one who doesn't have a secret agenda? You didn't know, Octavia said firmly. That's not a failing. That's victimhood. There's a difference. I put the birth certificate back on the table. Latrice, I said, testing the name. Our mother, is she... She's gone, Octavia said. She didn't sugarcoat it. I found her obituary first. She died 6 years ago. Breast cancer. She was only 52. I felt a pang of grief for a woman I never knew. Did you ever meet her? No, I was a year too late, but I found her sister, our aunt. She lives in Detroit. Octavia leaned forward, her eyes intense. Latrice didn't give us up because she didn't want us. That's the important part. She was 19. Her parents kicked her out when she showed. She was living in a shelter in Memphis. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning floors at a diner and doing laundry at a hotel. She tried to keep us. The social worker notes say she fought for 3 months to find housing that would take twins, but nobody would rent to a single black teenager with 2 infants in 1983, not without a co-signer. I listened, mesmerizing by this tragedy that was my origin story. I had always imagined, well, I didn't know what I imagined. My parents, the Mitchells, were middle class, safe, boring. I assumed I came from similar stock. So she gave us up, I whispered. She surrendered us, Octavia corrected, to give us a chance. The records say she wept so hard when she signed the papers that the nurse had to hold her hand steady. She requested we stay together. The agency ignored it. Octavia looked at the photo of the babies again. She went on to have a life, you know. She became a nurse's aide. She got married. We have a half-brother in Detroit, Marcus. He's a mechanic. Nice guy. I haven't told him about you yet. I wanted to find you first. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the frizz. I have a brother, a twin sister, a dead mother who loved me. Tears pricked my eyes again, but these weren't tears of fear. They were tears of overwhelming expansion. My world had been so small, just me, Dominic, and Zoe, a claustrophobic little triangle. Suddenly, The walls were blown out. Why didn't the Mitchells tell me? I asked again, the anger bubbling up. I spent my whole life feeling disconnected, like I didn't fit in. If you had known, maybe you wouldn't have felt so alone, Octavia finished for me. Maybe you wouldn't have been so vulnerable to a man like Dominic. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? Predators look for the isolated ones, Octavia said, her voice dropping into that professional register again. The ones who feel like they don't quite belong, they're easier to separate from the herd. Dominic didn't just stumble onto you, Olivia. He saw someone hungry for connection, and he fed you exactly what you needed until he had the hook set. I opened my mouth to defend him, a reflex, automatic as breathing, but stopped. Was she right? Tell me about him, Octavia said gently. Not the monster in the coffee shop? The man you married. How did it start? I looked down at my hands, twisting the plain gold band on my finger. It was loose. I had lost weight recently. He wasn't always like this, I began, my voice trembling. I know everyone says that. I know it sounds like a cliché, but he was magical. Magical how? Octavia pressed. Give me a scene. Make me see it. I was 22, I said, a faint smile touching my lips as the memory surfaced. I was working at the library, just a junior archivist. I was shy, I wore oversized sweaters and never spoke up in meetings. Dominic came in looking for blueprints for a renovation project. He was big, charismatic. He filled the room. I looked at the fireplace, seeing the past in the flames. He asked me for help, me, not the head librarian. He said I looked like the only person who actually knew where things were. We spent 3 hours in the archives. He listened to me talk about the Dewey Decimal System like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. He made you feel seen, Octavia noted. Yes, exactly. 2 days later, he sent flowers to the library. Not red roses, that would have been too generic. He sent stargazer lilies. He remembered me saying they were my favorite because they looked like explosions. The card just said, "To the girl who knows where everything is except her own worth." Smooth, Octavia muttered, but not unkindly. Very smooth. We started dating. He was like a whirlwind. He took me to places I'd never go, fancy steakhouses, jazz clubs. But it wasn't just the money. It was the protection. I remember once we were at a movie theater, and some guy was being loud, talking on his phone during the film. I was shrinking in my seat, just wanting to disappear. Dominic stood up, walked over to the guy, and just handled it. He didn't yell. He just said something quietly, and the guy shut up and left. I felt so safe, like nothing could hurt me when he was there. The knight in shining armor, Octavia said. He established himself as the protector early on. He was, I insisted. When my mom, Mrs. Mitchell, got sick, he was there every day. He drove her to chemo when I was working. He cooked dinner. He held me when she died. He was my rock, Octavia. He was the only thing holding me together. And when did the rock start to crush you? She asked. The question hung in the air. I took a deep breath, the nostalgia curdling into something sour. It wasn't all at once, I whispered. It was slow, like a dripping tap. When did it change? Octavia asked. She had taken a notebook out of her pocket and was making tiny notes. It should have felt invasive, but it felt validating. Someone was recording my reality. After Zoe was born, I said. That's when the helpful advice started. I rubbed my temples. I had postpartum depression. It was bad. I was crying all the time. Dominic was wonderful at first. He told me I didn't need to work, that I should stay home and focus on the baby. He said he'd handle the bills, the stress, everything. It felt like a gift. Financial dependency, Octavia murmured, scribbling. Step 1. Then the car broke down, I continued. My little Honda, the transmission blew. Dominic said it wasn't worth fixing. He said, "Why buy a new one? You're home all day anyway. If you need to go somewhere, I'll drive you or take a cab." It made sense. We were saving for a house. But then, if I wanted to go to the grocery store, I had to ask him. If I wanted to visit a friend, I had to work around his schedule. "And let me guess," Octavia said, "the friends became a problem." "He didn't ban them," I said quickly. "He never forbade me from seeing anyone. He just pointed things out. He'd say, 'Did you notice how Sarah made that dig about your weight?' Or, 'Why does Jen always ask to borrow money? She's using you, Liv.' And the thing is, sometimes he was right, or he made it sound so logical. So I stopped calling Sarah. I stopped seeing Jen. I didn't want to be used. I wanted to be with the one person who truly got me." "Isolation," Octavia said, checking it off an invisible list. He cleared the board so he was the only player left. "Then the gaslighting started," I said, the word feeling heavy on my tongue. "Small things. I'd put my keys on the hook. Next morning, they'd be in the fridge or under the sofa. He'd laugh and say, 'Baby brain Liv, you're losing it.' I started to believe him. I went to a doctor. The doctor said it was stress. Dominic told me I was fragile, that I needed him to manage my reality because I couldn't trust my own mind. I looked at Octavia, pleading. I truly believed I was going crazy, until today, when I saw the papers." "The papers," Octavia said, her eyes sharpening. "Let's talk about the papers. What exactly is happening right now?" "He quit his job 3 months ago," I said, the shame burning my cheeks. "He didn't tell me for 2 weeks. He'd leave in the morning with his briefcase and come back at 6. I only found out because his old boss called the house looking for a file." "What did he say when you confronted him?" "He exploded, said I was snooping, said he quit because they didn't respect his genius. He said he had a big venture coming up, something that would make us rich." I picked up my cold tea, staring into the dark liquid. Then the phone calls started. He goes into the hallway or out onto the balcony, always whispers. If I walk in, he hangs up or switches to a cheerful voice. "Just business, honey." "And the papers?" "About a month ago, he brought home a stack of documents. He said it was for business insurance. Said since he's self-employed now, we needed to protect our assets. I tried to read them, but he got impatient. He did that thing, tapping his foot, sighing. 'Do you trust me or not, Olivia? Do you want us to be homeless?' So I signed." "Do you know what you signed?" Octavia asked, her voice low and dangerous. "I saw the logos," I whispered. "Chase, Wells Fargo. They looked like loan applications, but he said the lender field was just legal terminology for the insurer." "He lied," Octavia said flatly. "Insurance policies don't have promissory notes. He's taking out loans, personal loans, in your name." "Why in my name?" "Because his credit is probably shot," Octavia said, "or more likely because he doesn't intend to pay them back. If the loan is in your name, the debt is yours. The liability is yours." "Today," I choked up. "Today was another one. He said it was an amendment, but I saw the number at the top, $50,000. Citibank." "That's grand larceny," Octavia said. She wasn't taking notes anymore. She was staring at the wall, calculating. "He's cashing out, Olivia. He's maxing out your credit, stripping the equity, and gathering liquid cash." "But why?" I asked, tears spilling over. "We have a daughter. We have 20 years together. Why would he destroy us?" "Because he's done," Octavia said brutally. "This is the exit strategy. I see it in my line of work all the time. The bust out. He racks up the debt, hides the cash, and then disappears. Or files for divorce and leaves you with the bill. You're not his wife anymore, Olivia. You're his credit line." I put my head in my hands. The room spun. $50,000. Plus the others. Maybe over $100,000. I was a librarian. I made $42,000 a year. I would never pay that off. I would lose the apartment. I would lose everything. I'm ruined. I sobbed into my hands. I'm absolutely ruined. "No," Octavia said. I heard her stand up. I felt her hand on my shoulder, heavy and solid. You're not ruined. You have a secret weapon. I looked up, my vision blurry. What? Me, she said, her face grim and set like stone. And I happen to be very, very good at taking down garbage men. You said you're a PI, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. But do you actually handle stuff like this? I thought private investigators just took pictures of cheating spouses. Octavia stood up and walked over to a small antique desk in the corner. She opened the top drawer. It didn't squeak. The tracks were well oiled, and pulled out a black leather bifold wallet. She tossed it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud that made the porcelain tea mugs rattle. Open it, she commanded. I reached out and flipped the wallet open. Inside, underneath a plastic window, was a gold shield. It wasn't a toy. The metal was tarnished slightly at the edges from wear. Next to it was an ID card. Octavia Williams, private detective, license, number 117, 0422. I don't just take pictures of cheaters, Olivia. Although sadly, that pays the rent most months, she said, leaning against the edge of the desk, crossing her arms. I specialize in financial fraud and asset recovery. I work with divorce lawyers to find the money husbands hide in offshore accounts or crypto wallets. I work with families who have been scammed by romance con artists. Dominic isn't a unicorn. He's an archetype. I've arrested men like him. I've ruined men like him. She walked back to the sofa and sat down, closer this time. I have a license to carry. I have relationships with the CPD Financial Crimes Unit. I'm not just your sister. I'm the worst nightmare for a guy who thinks he's the smartest person in the room. I looked from the badge to her face. It was my face, but hard. Where I had smile lines that had turned into worry lines, she had focus lines. You're really good at this, aren't you? I asked quietly. I'm expensive, she said with a dry smirk. But for family, I offer a 100% discount. I don't know if I can pay you back, ever, even if we fix this. You already paid, she said, her voice dropping. You survived 20 years so I could find you. That's payment enough. Octavia pulled a legal pad from under the coffee table. She clicked a pen, a nice one, heavy metal, not the cheap Bics we had at home. Let's profile him, she said, her tone clinical. This helps. Trust me. It stops him from being a monster under the bed and turns him into a diagnosis. Okay, I whispered. He isolates you. Checks. He controls the finances completely, right? Even before he quit his job? Yes. He gives me an allowance. For groceries. Financial abuse, she wrote down. The scratching of the pen was loud in the quiet room. He creates crises, like the coffee shop scene, to keep you off balance. He projects his own failures onto you. He calls you stupid or useless when he feels inadequate. He calls me an anchor, I corrected, dragging him down. Projection, she said firmly. He's the one drowning, Olivia. He quit his job with no plan. He's terrified. But instead of admitting it, he blames you. If he fails, it's not because he's incompetent. It's because his wife didn't support him. It's a defense mechanism, a pathetic one. She looked up at me. Does he have a history of physical violence? Be honest. I hesitated. He grabs me. Like today. He squeezes my arm. He pushes me sometimes. But he's never punched me. Grabbing is violence, Octavia said, her eyes flashing. Squeezing is violence. It's a test. He's testing your boundaries, seeing how much you'll take. And today you ran. That changed the equation. He's going to be so angry, I said, a fresh wave of nausea hitting me. When I go home, God, he's going to be waiting. He's not just angry, Octavia said, tapping the pen against the pad. He's desperate. You said he needs you to sign those papers for the Citibank loan? The $50,000? Yes, he said tonight. That means he's on a deadline. The bank probably needs the executed documents by tomorrow morning to fund the loan. If he doesn't get that signature, his house of cards collapses. That makes him dangerous, Olivia, but it also makes him predictable. Predictable how? He can't kill you, she said bluntly. Not yet. He needs your hand to hold the pen. You are literally worth more to him alive right now, but only until you sign. I shuddered. That's horrible. It's leverage, she corrected, and we are going to use it. Octavia saw me shaking and tossed the notepad back onto the table. Okay, enough profiling. Your cortisol levels are spiking. I can see your pulse in your neck. She got up and walked to the kitchen. I have leftover sweet potato pie from a bakery in Hyde Park that swears it's better than anyone's grandma's, and I have vanilla ice cream. I'm not hungry, I said automatically. Dominic always said I ate too much when I was stressed. I didn't ask if you were hungry, Octavia called back, the clinking of plates echoing. I said I have pie. We are eating the pie. It's biologically mandated for situations like this. She returned a moment later with 2 plates. The pie looked amazing, orange and dense with a perfectly crimped crust. She handed me a fork. Eat. I took a bite. The sweetness hit my tongue. Cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar. It was comfort in solid form. Oh my God, I moaned. Right? Octavia grinned, taking a huge bite of her own. Pearl, my mom. She couldn't cook to save her life, but she knew where to buy the good stuff. We ate in silence for a minute, the only sound the scraping of forks against china. It felt normal, domestic, like we had done this 1,000 times before. Do I look like her? I asked suddenly. Your mom. Pearl? No, Octavia said gently. You look like Latrice. I have a picture of her in her 20s. You have her smile. It's shy. Pearl was loud. She took up space. She wore bright caftans and huge earrings. You would have liked her. She would have wrapped you up in a bear hug and not let go. I would have liked that, I whispered. Octavia reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was warm. I missed you, you know. Even before I knew you existed, I always felt like I was forgetting something. I'd leave the house and pat my pockets, checking for keys, wallet. But it wasn't keys. It was you. I looked at her, tears welling up again. I felt it too. I used to talk to an imaginary friend when I was little. I called her Via. My parents thought it was cute, but maybe it was you. Via, Octavia smiled. I like that. Better than Detective Williams. She squeezed my hand. We lost 42 years, Olivia. Dominic stole the last 20 of them from you. I'm not letting him steal one more day. Not one. Octavia set her empty plate down on the floor. Her face changed. The softness evaporated, replaced by that sharp, calculating look I saw on the street. I have a plan, she said, but you're going to hate it, and then you're going to tell me I'm crazy, and then we're going to do it anyway. What is it? I asked, putting my plate down, my stomach tightening again. Dominic is waiting for Olivia to come home. Broken, apologetic, ready to sign the papers to keep the peace. That's the script, right? Yes, I nodded. He expects me to crawl back. So, Octavia said slowly, we give him what he wants. We give him Olivia. She pointed a finger at her own chest. But not you. I stared at her. I blinked. I don't understand. Me, she said. I go. I dress in your clothes. I do my hair in that messy bun. I walk into that apartment tomorrow morning. I apologize. I act scared. And I let him talk. No, I said instantly, pulling back. No way. Are you insane? He'll know. He's my husband. He knows my face, my voice. He knows our face, Octavia corrected. We are identical, Olivia. Monozygotic. The mole is in the same spot. Our height is within a quarter inch. Our voices? I've been listening to you for an hour. I can mimic the pitch. You speak from your throat, soft and breathy. Like this. She cleared her throat. When she spoke again, it wasn't Octavia. It was me. "I'm sorry, Dom. I didn't mean to make a scene. I'm just so tired." The sound of my own voice coming from her mouth made me jump. It was perfect. The hesitation, the slight tremble at the end of the sentence. That's witchcraft," I whispered. "It's mimicry. I'm good at it. It's part of the job, undercover work." "But why?" I asked. "Why would you do that? It's dangerous." "He's violent." "Because we need evidence," Octavia said. "Real, admissible evidence. If we just go to the police now, what do we have? He yelled at you in a coffee shop? Not a crime. He took out loans in your name? He'll say you authorized them verbally. It's a he said, she said civil matter. The police won't touch it." She leaned in close. "But if I get him to admit, on a recording, that he forged your signatures, that he plans to disappear, that the money is for him and not the business, that's fraud. That's grand larceny. That's a felony. We can lock him up, Olivia. We can annul the debt because we can prove it was obtained via fraud." I shook my head frantically. "I can't let you do that. What if he hurts you? What if he realizes it's not me and snaps?" "I can handle myself," Octavia said calmly. "I know Krav Maga. I have pepper spray in my bag. And frankly, Dominic is a bully, not a warrior. He pushes around women he thinks are weak. He won't know what hit him if he tries to touch me." "But listen to the alternative," Octavia interrupted, her voice hard. "Let's say you don't do this. Let's say you just leave him today. You file for divorce tomorrow." She held up one finger. "One, the debt is already in your name. Chase and Wells Fargo don't care about your marital drama. You owe them $70,000. With interest, that will bury you." She held up a second finger. "Two, he disappears. He has the cash. He leaves the state. Good luck finding him to serve divorce papers or get alimony. He vanishes, and you're left holding the bag." She held up a third finger. "Three, you live in fear. Every time the phone rings, every time you see a guy with his build on the street, you'll think it's him coming back for revenge." She lowered her hand. "The only way out is through, Olivia. We have to trap him. We have to get him to confess. And the only person he will confess to is the wife he thinks he has defeated. He will brag. Narcissists always brag when they think they've won. He'll tell me everything because he thinks I'm too stupid to use it against him." I looked at the floor. The logic was cold and ironclad. I was trapped in a financial burning building. Octavia was offering me a fire hose, but I had to let her walk into the flames to turn it on. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp," she said. "But you're not going. I am. You stay here. You drink tea. You read books. You wait for my call." "Where will you sleep?" I asked. "If you go tomorrow morning, you have to get in." "I have your keys," she said, nodding to my purse. "I'll go at 6 a.m. You said he sleeps late on weekends or when he's between jobs, right?" "He sleeps until 8 usually, unless Zoe wakes him up." "Perfect. I slip in. I make coffee. I wait." As if summoned by the mention of her name, my purse on the floor began to buzz. A muffled, rhythmic vibration against the hardwood. I froze. "It's my phone." Octavia glanced at it. "Who is it?" I reached into the bag and pulled it out. The screen was cracked, but the name Zoe Threepa flashed brightly. "It's Zoe," I said, panic rising in my throat. "She's calling. She never calls at this time. She has a seminar on Tuesdays." "Answer it," Octavia ordered. "Act normal. Do not, I repeat, do not. Tell her where you are. If she knows, she might panic. She might call Dominic. We need him unsuspecting." "I can't lie to her," I pleaded. "I've never lied to her." "You've been lying to her for years," Octavia said softly. "Every time you pretended you were happy. Every time you covered for Dominic. Just one more lie, Olivia. To save her future, too. If that debt hits you, it hits her college fund." That did it. The mention of Zoe's future. I took a deep breath. swiped the green button, and put the phone to my ear. "Hi, honey," I said. My voice was shaky, higher than usual. "Mom," Zoe's voice was tense. "Where are you? Dad just called me. He said you guys had a fight and you ran off. He sounded really pissed. Is everything okay?" My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Dominic was already spinning the narrative, turning our daughter against me. "I'm fine, Zoe," I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. We had a disagreement about the business. I needed to cool off." "Where are you? Are you at the apartment?" "No," I lied. I looked at Octavia. She nodded encouragingly. I'm staying with a friend, Sheila, from the library. You remember her?" "I think so," Zoe said, sounding unconvinced. "The one with the cats?" "Yes," I improvised. "The cats. I'm just going to crash here tonight. Let Dad cool down. You know how he gets." "Yeah, I know how he gets," Zoe sighed. There was a pause. "Mom, seriously. Was he scary? He sounded really aggressive on the phone. He asked if I knew where you were banking. It was weird." My stomach dropped. He was hunting for the money. "It's just stress, honey," I said, closing my eyes. "Don't worry about it. Focus on your classes. I'll be home tomorrow. Everything will be fixed tomorrow." "Okay," Zoe said, sounding small. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, baby." I hung up and dropped the phone onto the sofa cushion like it was radioactive. "I hate him," I whispered, the anger finally overtaking the fear. He called her. He tried to drag her into this. "Good," Octavia said grimly. "Use that anger. That's the fuel. Now stand up. We need to go to my closet. If I'm going to be you, I need to look like I've given up on life." We went into Octavia's bedroom. It was sparse and clean, with a king-sized bed made up with crisp white linens that looked like they belonged in a hotel. A massive walk-in closet took up one wall. "Okay," Octavia said, shedding her high-end clothes. She folded her navy trousers with military precision and placed them on a chair. "I need your outfit. Everything. The jeans, the shirt, the cardigan, even the socks." I felt a flush of embarrassment. "My clothes they're old. I haven't bought new jeans in 3 years. Dominic says denim is a waste of money because styles change too fast." "Give them to me," she said, standing there in her underwear. She had the same body as me, but firmer. Where I was soft from years of sedentary stress, she was toned. It was like seeing myself after a year of personal training. I undressed slowly, handing over my bundle of worn fabrics. Octavia pulled on my jeans. They were loose on her waist. "You've lost weight," she noted, frowning as she buttoned them. "Stress starvation? I just forget to eat sometimes." She pulled on my gray t-shirt. It had a small stain near the hem from bleach. She looked at it in the mirror, then put on the beige cardigan. She buttoned it up to the chin, hiding her collarbones. "God," she whispered, looking at herself. "This cardigan is depression in fabric form. It's heavy. It smells like—" She sniffed the sleeve. "Cheap lavender detergent and resignation." "It's the only one that doesn't have holes," I defended weakly. "It's perfect," she said. "For the mission, I mean. It makes me look shapeless." She sat at her vanity. "Hair next. You do that twisty thing with the claw clip?" "Yeah, I just grab it and shove it up to keep it out of my face." Octavia grabbed a hairbrush. She didn't brush her sleek hair. She teased it. She backcombed the roots until it looked frizzy and unkempt. Then she gathered it into a messy bun, pulling a few strands loose around her face. She took the plastic clip from my pile, it was missing one tooth, and jammed it in. "Makeup?" she asked. "No. Dominic says makeup makes me look like a clown." "Of course he does," she muttered. She grabbed a face wipe and aggressively scrubbed off her own light foundation and mascara. Her skin was naturally clearer than mine, but without the makeup, she looked rawer. She turned to me. "Well, how do I look?" I stared. It was horrifying. She looked exactly like me. The slump of the shoulders she was adopting, the messy hair, the drab clothes. It was like she had put on my misery like a costume. "You look like me," I whispered. "It makes me want to cry." "Good," she said, though her eyes were sad. "If I can fool you, I can fool him." "Now the hard part," Octavia said, standing up. She walked to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room. "The physical is easy. The behavioral is the trick." She started moving around the room. At first, she walked like herself, long strides, head up, arms swinging. Then she stopped. She closed her eyes. "Talk to me," she said. "Tell me exactly what happens when he walks into a room." I freeze," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Just for a second, to gauge his mood. I listen to his footsteps. If they're heavy, he's mad. If they're fast, he's manic." Octavia nodded. She opened her eyes, but they were different now. She dropped her chin. She pulled her shoulders up toward her ears, what I called the turtle tuck. She clasped her hands in front of her stomach, picking at her cuticles. "Like this?" she asked. Her voice was smaller now. "Yes," I said, a chill running down my spine. "But you apologize too much, even with your body, like you're trying to take up less space." She shifted her weight to one leg, shrinking into herself. She crossed her arms protectively across her chest. "I do this thing," I added, "when I'm lying. Or when I'm scared, he thinks I'm lying. I touch my neck, right here." I touched the hollow of my throat. Octavia mimicked the gesture perfectly. She looked at her reflection, then looked away quickly, darting her eyes to the floor. "Why the floor?" she asked. "Because eye contact is a challenge," I explained. "If I look him in the eye for too long, he asks me what my problem is. He says I'm staring him down." "So you submit," she said. "You offer your throat or you look down." She practiced it for 20 minutes. The flinch when a car honked outside, the nervous smoothing of the cardigan hem, the way I bit my lip when I was thinking. It was excruciating to watch. It was an autopsy of my own trauma, performed by a living mirror. I realized then how much I had changed over the years. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a collection of survival tics. "Stop," I said finally, my voice cracking. "Please, it's too real." Octavia dropped the act instantly. Her spine straightened. Her chin came up. The transformation was so fast it was jarring. "I'm sorry," she said, coming over to sit next to me. "I know it's hard to see, but if I walk in there with my detective strut, he'll know in 5 seconds. I have to be the Olivia he expects, the Olivia he broke." "You're really good at that." I wiped a tear. "Too good. I'm a chameleon, Liv. It keeps me safe. But tomorrow the chameleon bites back." We didn't sleep much. Octavia set up the pull-out couch for me in the living room, putting on high thread count sheets that felt like silk against my skin. She gave me one of her oversized t-shirts to sleep in. It smelled like sandalwood. I lay in the dark, staring at the tin ceiling tiles. The city light filtered in through the blinds, painting stripes across the room. I could hear the radiator clanking, a comforting, old building sound. Octavia came out around 2 a.m. She couldn't sleep either. She sat in the armchair across from the sofa, wrapped in a quilt. "You awake?" she whispered. "Yeah, my brain won't shut off." "Me neither," replaying the entry strategy. "Do you think he'll know?" I asked into the darkness. "Deep down?" "They say spouses have a connection." "Dominic doesn't have a connection with you," Octavia said quietly. "He has a connection with his idea of you. He doesn't look at you, Liv. He looks through you. He sees a utility, an appliance. Do you notice if your toaster is feeling sad today? No, you just notice if it burns the bread. That's harsh. It's the truth. That's our advantage. His arrogance is his blind spot. He thinks you're incapable of deception, so he won't look for it." "I'm scared for you," I admitted, entering the lion's den. It's not a lion's den, she scoffed softly. It's a hyena's den. Scavengers are dangerous, but they're cowards. And remember, I'm wired. I'm not going in alone. You're here. The cops are a phone call away. I've never been brave, I said. Not like you. You stayed, she said fiercely. You took 20 years of emotional shrapnel to protect your daughter. You kept a roof over her head while a man tried to dismantle your sanity. That's not cowardice, Olivia. That's endurance. That's the hardest kind of brave there is. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I just want it to be over. It will be, she promised. By lunch tomorrow, the world is going to look very different. We fell into a silence that lasted until the sky began to turn a bruised purple outside the window. 5:30 a.m. came too fast. The alarm on Octavia's phone buzzed, a sharp, aggressive sound. I sat up, groggy and nauseous. Octavia was already up. She was in the kitchen, drinking black coffee, fully dressed in my clothes. In the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen, with her hair messed up and no makeup, she looked exhausted. She looked exactly like me on a Tuesday. "Coffee," she said, handing me a mug. "Drink up. Adrenaline dump is coming." "Are you ready?" "Born ready." She put the mug down and reached for a small device on the counter. It was a Sony ICD UX570 voice recorder, slim and black, no bigger than a pack of gum. "This is the primary," she said. "I've cleared the memory. It records in high-def linear PCM. It picks up whispers from across the room." She slipped it into the inner pocket of the cardigan. "I'm taping it down so it doesn't slide." She used a piece of gaffer tape to secure it to the fabric inside. Invisible. "What if he searches you?" "He won't. He's not a cop. He's a husband who thinks he's won. Why would he search a defeated wife?" She picked up her phone. "I've set up a shortcut on my screen. If things go south, if he gets violent, if he locks the door and I can't get out, I press this icon. It sends a 911 help text to you and dials 911 immediately on speaker." "Okay," I breathed. "Okay." She checked her pockets. "Keys?" I handed her my keychain. The little pewter angel charm jingled. "Phone?" "I'm taking yours," she said. "I left mine here." "If he checks my phone, he needs to see your cracked screen and your photos of Zoe. I forwarded my calls to your number just in case." She took my phone and slid it into her back pocket. "This is it," she said, looking at me. She reached out and grabbed my shoulders. "Stay here. Do not leave this apartment. Do not answer the landline. If I don't call you by 10 a.m., you call the police and send them to the address. Got it?" "Got it. 10 a.m." "I love you, sis," she said, and pulled me into a hug. It was quick, hard, and smelled of cheap lavender detergent. "Love you too," I whispered. She turned and walked out the door. The heavy oak door clicked shut. I locked the deadbolt, slid down to the floor, and started to pray. Note: from this point on, I am reconstructing the events based on the audio recordings and Octavia's detailed statement to the police. Octavia stepped out into the pre-dawn chill of Bronzeville. The streetlights were still buzzing, casting long yellow shadows. She didn't take her car. Dominic would recognize the plates of a sleek black sedan. Instead, she walked 2 blocks east and hailed a regular taxi, paying cash. 74th and Jeffrey, she told the driver, keeping her voice low. The ride was quiet. Octavia spent the 20 minutes getting into character. She slumped in the back seat, watching the city wake up. She forced her breathing to become shallow. She thought about the debts, the shouting, the fear. She needed to smell like fear when she walked in that door. The cab dropped her off a block away from the apartment complex. It was a deliberate choice. She needed the wind to hit her face, to make her eyes water, to make her nose run slightly. She needed to look like she had walked all night, or at least spent the morning wandering in the cold. She walked the final block slowly. The familiar brick building loomed ahead, a place I had called home for 12 years, but which Octavia saw for what it was, a prison. She checked the time. 6:45 a.m., perfect. The early risers were just leaving for work. The lobby would be busy enough to provide witnesses if needed, but quiet enough to slip in. She reached the front door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the keys. Not acting. The adrenaline was real. She was walking into a cage with a tiger, armed only with a plastic recorder and her wits. She buzzed herself in. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open and smelled the familiar scent of the lobby, floor wax and stale cigarette smoke from the super's office. She walked to the elevator, then stopped. No, she thought. Olivia would take the stairs, to delay the moment, to avoid people. She turned to the stairwell. Octavia climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her steps heavy. She reached the 4th floor landing and paused to catch her breath. She adjusted the cardigan, making sure the recorder was secure and hidden. She reached in and pressed the tiny RREC button. A faint red light blinked once, then vanished. We were live. She opened the stairwell door and stepped into the hallway. It was lined with cheap brown carpet that hadn't been changed since the 90s. Olivia, Octavia froze. The door to 4A, directly across from our apartment, was open a crack. Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was the neighborhood watch in a floral housecoat. She was 70, smelled permanently of menthol cigarettes and wet cat food, and nothing happened in that building without her knowing. Mrs. Higgins stepped out, clutching a bag of trash. Her curlers were still in. She squinted at Octavia. "I thought I heard you," the old woman rasped. "You're out early. Or coming in late?" This was the first test. Octavia hunched her shoulders immediately, offering the turtle tuck. "Hi, Mrs." "Higgins," she said, using my breathy, apologetic voice. I just went for a walk. Couldn't sleep." Mrs. Higgins narrowed her eyes. She scanned Octavia from head to toe. For a terrifying second, Octavia thought the game was up. Mrs. Higgins had known me for a decade. She knew my walk, my slump. "You look..." Mrs. Higgins paused, searching for the word. "Taller. You standing up straight for once?" Octavia's heart hammered. She quickly slouched more, leaning against the wall. Just anxious. You know how it is." Mrs. Higgins huffed, shifting the trash bag. "I know how he is. Heard him yelling yesterday. Shook the walls." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And I saw her again, you know." Octavia paused. This was intel. "Saw who?" "That little blonde hussy," Mrs. Higgins spat. "Came by last night bold as brass after you left. Had a key, too. Let herself right in around 8 p.m. Didn't leave till midnight." Octavia felt a surge of cold rage on my behalf. "Chantel. He brought his mistress into our home hours after I ran away, into the bed I made." "Oh," Octavia said, letting her voice crack perfectly. I see." "Don't you let him walk all over you, baby," Mrs. Higgins said, her face softening with pity. "You're a good woman. Too good for that trash." "Thanks, Mrs. Higgins," Octavia whispered. I have to go inside. Talk to him." "Good luck," the neighbor muttered. "If he starts breaking things again, I'm calling the cops. I don't care what he says." "Thank you," Octavia said sincerely. She turned to DAR 4B. The unexpected ally had just given her the ammunition she needed. Dominic wasn't just a fraud, he was an adulterer who had violated the sanctuary of the home. Octavia took a deep breath, gripped the key, and slid it into the lock. She turned it. The tumbler clicked. It was time to perform. The door to apartment 4B swung open with a rusty squeak that set my teeth on edge. Octavia stepped inside, and immediately the smell hit her. It wasn't the warm, bookish scent of her own place. It was the smell of stagnation, stale pepperoni pizza, unwashed laundry, and the cloying chemical undertone of savage cologne sprayed over sweat. She closed the door softly, turning the deadbolt. Click. She stood in the hallway for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the gloom. The shades were drawn. A pile of mail sat on the floor where it had been shoved through the slot. Bills, mostly. Red lettering on the envelopes. Final notice. Past due. She bent down, picked them up, and placed them on the little entry table, stacking them neatly. That's what Olivia would do, tidy the mess while the ship sank. She walked into the living room. It was a showroom of neglect. A half-eaten bag of Doritos on the sofa, a beer bottle leaving a wet ring on the coffee table. This was Dominic's domain. When Olivia was here, she kept it spotless out of fear. With her gone for less than 24 hours, he had let his natural state take over. Octavia felt a surge of revulsion, but she shoved it down, channeling it into her performance. She walked to the kitchen. Her footsteps on the linoleum were quiet, hesitant. She saw the sink full of dishes. He didn't even rinse a plate, she thought. She filled the kettle. Her hands were steady, but she forced a tremor as she set it on the burner. She needed to be making noise, domestic, non-threatening noise to wake the beast. Clink, whoosh, snap. The gas ignited. She leaned against the counter, hugging the beige cardigan around herself, feeling the hard plastic lump of the Sony recorder against her ribs. It's on, she reminded herself. Red light is blinking. Just get him talking. 10 minutes later, she heard it. The heavy thud of feet hitting the floor in the bedroom down the hall. A groan, the sound of a toilet flushing. Octavia stiffened. She turned her back to the hallway, staring intently at the steam rising from her mug. She assumed the posture, shoulders up, head down, body made small. Dominic shuffled into the kitchen. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a tight white undershirt that showed off the bulk he was so proud of, though it was softening into fat around the middle. His hair was matted on one side. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to the fridge, opened it, and drank orange juice directly from the carton. He gulped it down, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Only then did he acknowledge the woman standing by the stove. "You're back," he grunted. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, devoid of relief or affection. About time. I was about to call the cops and report the car stolen. Then I remembered you don't have the car. Octavia turned slowly. She kept her eyes on his chest, avoiding his face. "I'm sorry, Dom," she whispered, using the perfect breathy cadence of her sister. I just needed some air. I got confused." Dominic snorted. He leaned against the island, crossing his arms. He looked at her with a mix of contempt and satisfaction. "Confused? That's your baseline state, Olivia. You ran out of there like a psycho. Do you know how embarrassing that was for me? The barista looked at me like I was the problem." "I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to embarrass you." "Well, you did." He walked over to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of morning breath and aggression. "But you're here now, which means you realized you have nowhere else to go, right?" Octavia nodded, biting her lip. "Right. Good." He reached out and patted her cheek. It wasn't a caress. It was a slap that stopped just short of stinging. A proprietary tap. "Make me some coffee. Real coffee, not that instant crap. And then we have business." They sat at the small kitchen table. Dominic had his coffee, black, 2 sugars. Octavia held her mug with both hands, using it as a shield. "So," Dominic said, leaning back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight, "did you bring the pen? Or do I need to supply that too?" I'm ready to sign," Octavia said softly. I want to make sure I understand, so I don't get confused again." Dominic rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Olivia, it's not quantum physics." I know, she stammered. "It's just the numbers, the loan at Chase. That was for $30,000, right? In March?" Dominic narrowed his eyes. "Why are you bringing up old shit?" "I'm just trying to keep it straight in my head," she added a wobble to her voice. "Please, Dom, I'm trying to be helpful. I just want to know what our total exposure is, so I can budget." "Budget," he scoffed. "You don't budget, I budget. But yes, 30 at Chase, 40 at Wells Fargo, and today 50 at Citibank. That's the capital stack. Are you happy?" "And And the signatures, Octavia pressed, her heart hammering against the recorder. The ones on the Wells Fargo papers? I don't remember signing those. Dominic laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. Of course you don't. You were sleeping, or migraine. I handled it. I traced your little scribble. Nobody looks at that crap anyway. Gotcha, Octavia thought. Admission of forgery. But isn't that illegal? She asked, making her eyes wide. It's efficient. Dominic slammed his hand on the table. Stop being such a prude. It's for the business. Once the returns come in, I pay it all off and you never even know it happened. I'm doing the heavy lifting here, Liv. Octavia looked down at her coffee. But Mrs. Higgins, she said something. Dominic froze. What did that old bat say? She said she saw a woman here, last night. Blonde. Young. Dominic's face went through a complex series of contortions, shock, guilt, and then settling firmly on rage. She's senile, he spat. She said she had a key, Dom, Octavia whispered, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. Is it Chantel? Dominic slammed his coffee mug down. Coffee sloshed onto the table. How do you know that name? I saw a text on your phone once. I didn't say anything because I was scared. You went through my phone? Dominic stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You violate my privacy after everything I do for you? Is she the reason we need the money? Octavia asked, her voice trembling but persistent. Are you leaving me, Dom? Are you taking the $120,000 and going to her? You know what? Dominic sneered, looking down at her. Yeah, maybe I am. Maybe I'm tired of coming home to a mousy, pathetic little anchor. Chantel appreciates me. She doesn't ask questions about interest rates. She just says, "Thank you, Daddy." Admission of intent to defraud and abandon. So you're stealing the money, Octavia said, her voice hardening just a fraction. You're leaving me with the debt. It's not stealing if you give it to me. Dominic grinned, a shark-like baring of teeth. Now where are those papers? Let's get this over with. He turned to the counter where his briefcase sat. Octavia let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She had it. She had everything. Forgery, fraud, adultery, intent. She started to stand up. I think I need to use the bathroom first. She moved too fast, or maybe she moved too smoothly. Dominic turned back, watching her rise. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the way she stood, balanced, weight on the balls of her feet, not the flat-footed shuffle of his beaten-down wife. Wait a minute, he said. I really need to go, Octavia said, edging toward the hallway. Come here, he commanded. Dom, please. He lunged. He was faster than she gave him credit for. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around. His hand clamped onto her bicep, his fingers digging in. You're acting weird, he hissed, pulling her close. You're not crying. Why aren't you crying? Let me go, Octavia shouted, and this time the voice was hers, stronger, deeper. Dominic's eyes widened. He looked at her face, really looked at it, inches away. Then his gaze dropped to her chest. The cardigan was pulled tight by his grip. The outline of the recorder was visible, a rectangular block against her ribs. What is that? He didn't wait for an answer. He ripped the cardigan open. Buttons popped, pinging against the linoleum floor. He jammed his hand into the inner pocket and yanked out the Sony recorder. No! Octavia shouted, grabbing for it. Dominic shoved her back hard. She stumbled, her hip hitting the counter edge. Pain shot down her leg. Dominic held the recorder up. The red light was blinking steadily. You wire-wearing bitch, he breathed, his face turning a dark, mottled purple. You were taping me? Give it to me, Dominic, Octavia said, dropping the accent entirely. Her stance shifted into a defensive crouch. You want it? He laughed, a high, manic sound. Here. He raised his arm and smashed the recorder onto the granite countertop. Crack. Pieces of black plastic flew everywhere. The battery compartment exploded. He grabbed the largest piece, the memory card slot, and threw it into the sink, turning on the garbage disposal. Grr, crunch, grr. The mechanical grinding sound filled the kitchen. Octavia watched her evidence, her perfect, admissible, slam-dunk evidence, turn into confetti. Dominic turned off the disposal. Silence rushed back into the room. "There," he panted, wiping his hands on his pants. "Now it's just your word against mine. And nobody believes the crazy wife." Octavia stood by the counter, her heart racing. The plan was dead. The evidence was gone. She was locked in an apartment with a man who now knew he had been betrayed. But Dominic didn't attack. He laughed. He leaned back against the sink, crossing his arms, looking at her with a terrifying pity. "You really thought you could outsmart me?" he asked, shaking his head. "I'm always 3 steps ahead, Olivia. I knew something was off the second you walked in. You didn't smell right." He was monologuing. He felt safe. The threat was neutralized. "You're going to prison, Dom," Octavia said, her mind racing. She shifted her weight, her hand drifting toward her back pocket where Olivia's phone sat. "For what?" he taunted. "For yelling at my wife? For borrowing money she agreed to? There's no proof. I'll tell the cops you're hysterical. I'll tell them you're off your meds. I'll have you committed, Liv. And while you're in the psych ward, I'll be in Cancun with Chantel." Octavia's fingers found the phone. She felt for the volume button and the power button, the shortcut she had programmed. Press and hold for 3 seconds. She held it. She felt a single strong vibration against her glute. Silent alarm sent. Dialing 911. She needed to keep him talking. She needed him to say it loud enough for the dispatcher on the open line in her pocket. "You're admitting it," she shouted, taking a step toward him to close the distance for the microphone. "You're admitting you're stealing the $50,000 from Citibank?" "I'm taking what's mine," Dominic roared back, pushing off the sink. "I earned it. Putting up with your whining for 20 years? That's hazard pay. Yeah, I'm taking the 50 grand, and the 70 before that, and you're going to be left with nothing but the debt collectors knocking on your door." "And the signatures?" Octavia goaded, backing up to keep him following her. "You forged them." "So what if I did?" he screamed, his face contorted. "You're too stupid to sign them yourself. I did you a favor. I signed your name better than you do." He advanced on her, cornering her against the fridge. "And now," he lowered his voice to a menacing growl, "you're going to sign the new ones. For real this time, or I'm going to break every finger in your hand until you can't hold a pen." "Is that a threat?" Octavia yelled clearly. "Are you threatening to break my fingers? It's a promise, you useless cow." Boom, boom, boom. 3 thunderous knocks shook the front door. "Chicago police, open up!" The color drained from Dominic's face instantly. He froze, his hand halfway raised toward Octavia. He looked at the door, then back at her. Confusion clouded his eyes. You didn't call them," he whispered. "I have your phone." He patted his pocket where he had confiscated Octavia's phone earlier. "Open the door, Dominic," Octavia said, her voice icy calm, "or they'll kick it in." "Just shut up," he hissed. "Let me handle this. You're having an episode, remember? You're having an episode." He smoothed his hair, put on a mask of concerned citizenship, and walked to the door. He unlocked it and opened it just a crack. "Officers," he said, his voice smooth as butter, "I'm so sorry. My wife is having a bit of a mental health crisis. She's shouting a lot. I'm trying to calm her down." 2 uniformed officers pushed the door open, ignoring his blocking stance. It was a male officer, tall and broad, and a female officer with her hand on her taser. "We received a 911 open line call from this location," the female officer said, scanning the room. "We heard threats of physical violence." No, Dominic laughed nervously. "Just a heated argument. Marriage, right?" "Step aside, sir," the male officer ordered. He looked at Octavia. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Octavia stepped away from the fridge. She didn't cower. She didn't look down. She pulled the tattered remains of the beige cardigan closed, stood to her full height, and looked Dominic dead in the eye. "Officer," she said, her voice clear and authoritative. "My name is Octavia Williams. I am a licensed private investigator. That man is Dominic King. I would like to press charges for assault, battery, and I believe you just heard his confession to grand larceny and forgery on the dispatch tape." Dominic's jaw dropped. "What? No, that's Olivia. That's my wife." "No, Dominic," Octavia said. She reached up and pulled the cheap plastic clip from her hair. She shook her head and the messy bun unraveled, falling into the sleek, dark waves she usually wore. She stood differently now, shoulders back, chin high. The resemblance was still there, but the person had changed. "Olivia is safe," she said. "I'm the one who's going to put you away." I don't understand," Dominic stammered, backing up until he hit the wall. "Twins? You don't have a twin." "Surprise," Octavia said flatly. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back," the male officer said, pulling out his cuffs. "This is a mistake," Dominic shouted as the cold metal clicked onto his wrists. "She's lying. She's crazy. She broke the recorder." "We heard you, sir," the female officer said, taking the phone Octavia handed her from her back pocket. "The line is still open. Dispatch recorded everything." Dominic looked at Octavia one last time as they hauled him out. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was the pathetic confusion of a bully who had finally picked a fight he couldn't win. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm the anchor," Octavia smiled coldly. "And you just sank." Update: 3 months later. It's been 3 months since the day the police led Dominic out of apartment 4B in handcuffs. The neighbors are still talking about it. Mrs. Higgins says it was the best show she's seen since the 90s. A lot has changed. The divorce isn't final yet. Dominic is fighting it from behind bars, using a public defender who looks exhausted, but he's not getting out anytime soon. The recording from the 911 call, combined with the forensic audit of the bank documents, was enough to deny him bail. He's facing 5 to 10 years for wire fraud and identity theft. As for the money, it was a mess, but a fixable one. Octavia's friends in the fraud unit helped me file the identity theft affidavits. Because we could prove I didn't sign the papers, Octavia actually got a handwriting expert to analyze the shaky signatures Dominic forged. Chase and Wells Fargo had to eat the loss. My credit score is tanked for now, but I'm debt-free. I moved out of the apartment. I couldn't stay there. The smell of him was in the walls. I live in a small 2-bedroom in Hyde Park now. It's sunny. I have plants. I bought a yellow sofa because Dominic hated yellow. And I have a new job. I'm still a librarian part-time, but 2 days a week I work at Williams & Associates. I'm the office manager. I handle the filing, the research, the background checks. It turns out being hyper-vigilant for 20 years makes you really good at spotting inconsistencies in financial records. I'm looking at Octavia right now. She's at her desk, yelling at an insurance company on the phone, looking fierce and beautiful. She looks like me. But for the first time in my life, when I look at her, I don't just see a sister I missed. I see a future I'm finally ready to live. Dominic tried to break me. He tried to erase me. But all he did was introduce me to the person who would help me find myself. Thanks for listening. And remember, if your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. And if you ever find out you have a secret twin sister, definitely let her handle the heavy lifting. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.